You can't replace part of the brain. Like, you
treat them the same.
A source of truth for the medtech industry.
Coexists with the province.
Robot understands things automatically.
Number one show in the medtech industry.
So Stryker got ahead of that and changed in the 90s, built $1 billion company that held up high, a lot of things.
State of MedTech with your host, Omar and Khatib.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. I'm joined today by Rachael Kim. Rachael actually came up on my feed through some content of hers. She's an emerging investor. More importantly, she's the CEO of the Femtech Salon, where they really focus on essentially driving generational wealth with underserved communities. She's got a great story and a lot of interesting takes on the evolving landscape of medtech VC. Before we get into that, a couple of reminders to the audience. Number one, if you're an investor listening to the show, I want to remind you that, hey, we get a lot of deal flow on this show. We get a lot of companies that come straight out of university or labs, early stage, pre-seed. And so something that we like to offer to our investor audience, whether you're a venture capitalist, family fund, or even a private investor, is if you check the show notes below, we have a Google form we'd like you to fill out. Fill out this form. Tell us about the kind of check sizes you'd like to write, the kind of investments you like to make, the companies that get you excited. And as those companies come on our show, we try to always connect those companies with investors. This is not something that's going to cost you anything. Our goal here on the State of MedTech is that we're trying to get companies funded and do it in the most efficient way possible. So go ahead and check out that link and fill that out. Secondly, if you're a founder listening to this show, we know how hard it is to raise awareness with investors and also, and I would say just as importantly, drive commercial pipeline. Finding those early adopters is really difficult. And so here at Khatib & Co., we work with you to use both social media and AI to figure out how do we strengthen your message? How do we amplify what you're doing to the market and start driving that commercial pipeline? And more importantly, finding those early adopters who will adopt your product, work with your product team, and sort of open up a market. So if you're interested to learn more, I'd love to talk to you. Hit me up on LinkedIn or go to khatibandco.com. So with that being said, let's get into our episode. Rachael, it's so great to have you on the show. And you're over in Europe right now, so I'm glad we're able to make the time work. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well. I mean, sun is shining. You know, being in Spain is always a great look for summer. So, and a lot of been busy, really, like work-wise. I think, been doing things out of London, the Netherlands, as well as the US. So you could definitely say the femtech area is heating up, and there's a lot more interest in supporting that, which I always love.
Yeah, same here. And I think it's important because I think that for a while it was definitely an underfunded area, but I feel that in the last, from my perspective, 3 to 5 years, we've seen a lot more interest in it, a lot more investors who are specifically focused on it, like yourself. So I'm really happy to hear that. Maybe before you sort of dive in, there's a lot of topics I want to, get your take on. Give us a little bit of background, like who is Rachael Kim? What's your story?
Who is Rachael Kim? What I'm going to say, a empathic neurodivergent who grew up in the Pacific Northwest and really found herself in tech. So I've been in tech for 15 years. I did 10 years with Accenture, was a corporate entrepreneur before I became a serial entrepreneur myself. And what made my switch from corporate life into startup life was the fact that I had health issues, actually, and I almost died. So it made me relook at how I wanted to use my superpowers for good. And what I was really great at Accenture was being shipped off to random countries with random clients in new areas and trailblazing that into actual deals. And actually not only building out the deals on pre-sale sales, but actually executing them as well and advising clients across the board. I think one of my biggest triumphs was there was a German investment bank that we had never done work with in a certain area. And they kept me on for 2 years. And so that's a really good example of like, I have the ability to work across, cross-functionally within different ecosystems, right? To get people to work together. And that's really where, the emergence of Femtech Salon came from, was my experiences as a serial founder and also other founders as well, having the same issue of there are a lot of additional hidden challenges that they don't talk about for Femtech founders. And so how can you help accelerate what's necessary? And honestly, the answer is community. I think we're really understanding that now. But, 5 years ago, even 3 years ago, there wasn't really anything in LA. So I just started with one event, and that spun into over 16 events across the US. And we're working internationally now as well with some consulates to support their female founders as well as Femtech founders. But yeah, I think if you were to think of my one-liner, it's I'm a driver of equity in all forms, or a catalyst of equity in all forms. And so that really speaks to my intersectional experiences, but that's also why my next step as a VC and investor is really looking at the structure of VC and how can you contribute back into under-resourced communities to actually enable stronger economic development and financial acumen, because I think that's really missing. And that really came to light during COVID, where there's just been a lot of I would say a lot of messaging around investing in DEI and trying to break the mold and all this stuff. But a lot of the impact has been obscured. And so I'm really trying to look at it as well. How can you transparently demonstrate social good, public good with VCs who have good raps or bad raps? I'm really looking at it transforming or transmuting, something bad into good. And that's sort of like my vibe. So that's a little bit about me.
I love it. I love it. And what I think is important is that, especially in the world of venture capital, and this is why, like, one of the missions of my show is that, we want to bring more money into the industry because, quite frankly, I'm sick and tired of seeing people invest in just like random nonsense, hoping to get like 1,000x return. And I get it, people are investors and stuff, but there's plenty of people who have made a lot of money already. And I think that, finding a really good medtech company that maybe you get a 10x return, maybe 20x, something like that. But knowing that you invest in something that was going to do a social good and save lives, I think people just need to start changing the way they invest and sort of developing more of like a true vision and philosophy around it. I feel like this is my perspective. I feel like there's a lot of VCs who just kind of BS and they're like, oh, we're so mission driven, and then you kind of like look at the actions and what they invest in. I'm like, no, you're not. So how do you change that?
Well, you have a starting point, right? So Adeo Rossi from Venture Institute, VC Lab, Founder Institute, they started the Mensaria So, right? So at least there's like a commitment that venture capitalists can start with. I'm a big person of, I love conceptual as a coffee table thing, but how do you actually demonstrate or convert? Actually, I wrote a LinkedIn post about this where, maybe they commit 1% into investing in infrastructure and for local communities. Maybe they provide office hours. Maybe they provide microloans, right? Like there's all this information about how you can support underserved communities and actually make them to be, I would say, growing centers of innovation as well as wealth. And so I feel like underserved communities are really, I would say, untapped business opportunities in a lot of senses. And I go on a little bit more on that LinkedIn post, but it's also one of the things that I've talked about is you could also have a certification. So, on top of that, you do reporting, you actually have the transparency to demonstrate your actual impact. And but it starts with an idea, and that idea was Mensaria So, which I think is a great starting point, and you can incorporate that into your LPA or your limit partner agreements, right? For people at least to start saying, ethically speaking, this is where we're starting, and then you agree how that actually looks like. So we're in a space where it's probably emerging as a discussion point. I'm really pushing it because I truly believe, and I have a personal story behind this, that for many immigrants and underserved communities, generational wealth is the difference of like one small thing that happened in their family. And for my family, for my father's family, it was one match. And that lit up the entire wealth and left my family destitute. And so that is not an uncommon thing when you're talking about underserved communities. It's normally the difference of one thing. And so even if you can move the needle 1%, that's 1% better than where we are. In addition to that, we're also in the Gen Z era where they have access to a lot of data, they are actually much more socially conscious in terms of how they spend. They do want to invest. And so the world is shifting right now. And I think the key thing is, having the right discourse around it to actually shape and test things that really do work. Because as I said, concepts are great, the coffee table conversations, but you got to test them.
No, I completely agree. And I think my biggest thing is I just want to see people taking more action. And it doesn't have to be big things. Like, something that I saw, I can't remember who was doing it. Obviously, it's beneficial to the fund, but there was one group that I think every month they had like an open office hour where any founder can come and like sort of pitch them, and they'll just get feedback. At least on the female founder side, something that I would love. I don't know who would do this, but this is just something that I remember thinking about the other day after like our conversation was, for a lot of female founders, they have kids, right? And it's really tough to get childcare. And sometimes, as a female founder, you can't afford to either do that, or let's say, if they're married, the husband's working, and so I would really I think it'd be so cool to see some people from the investment community come together and say, hey, like let's build like a co-working space, make it really cheap for somebody to use, and then offer some form of childcare, like a playground or something in the middle. I don't know. So I see it, and it can be done because I see so many gyms that they're not like Equinox, and they offer like really nice childcare for like $5. They have like a nice little playground. They got like 5 people there. And I was thinking, I was like, why can't this exist in in the startup community? And why isn't it everywhere?
It can. It just requires someone to want to take it up, right? Like there's so many ideas, there's so many things that people can do. The question is who's passionate enough to actually do it. And you're absolutely correct. Most Femtech founders, female founders, are carers. And it's not just children, they're elderly parents or person. And that's why we built the Femtech Salon, because instead of having Femtech founders sit in 3-day conferences or 2-day conferences, they make the same amount of connections that actually help them and are invested in their story as people in 3 hours, right? So a lot of it is how, we look at experiences on intimate, immersive, and intentional. Intentionality is huge for us. And so just like what you said, I think is very possible. It's just going to be about who spearheads it, right? And very much, I could think of a number of VCs who can potentially consider it, at least for their female founder portfolio, potentially. But that would require them to physically be in the same area, right? So, but I love the fact that you threw that idea out here, because now we can just ideate and we can actually test that. Because some of it would be, well, maybe they just get allocated some kind of stipend for childcare, which a lot of Femtech founders need, right? And so even if it's not, if they're not local to the co-working space that the VCs built or any of the ecosystem builders have built, they at least have that as a second option. So you hit the nail on the head there. That's part of the additional hidden challenges of actually being a female founder and or the Femtech founder.
Yeah, I completely. As it stands today, what are some initiatives that you see happening that you feel are like a great example of this and that we need more of?
Initiative. So I think when you start, it's much more common to see VCs at least offer the open office hours, right? That's a pretty low lift, and it does provide deal flow and also just being able to create intimate relationships that could result into something further. I would say the fact that VC Lab has a Mansarius Oath is another one where they talk about and they push people within the cohort to say, like, how would you actually do that from day to day? Like, what would you do? And so that's like another aspect of that. I would say on some level, there's some VCs that do like capital and loans, right? So debt. As they do it, the line of whether they're truly a VC or just another financial services institution is questionable, depending on if they actually invest or if that's sort of what they do. But that's probably it. I mean, that's what I mean. We're on this frontier of there are so many practical things we could do. And it's just about getting the venture community talking about it. And because if I think about even some amazing female-run VCs, right? Like, what do they offer? I mean, a lot of it is they offer their time, they offer their resources, they throw events to build community. But beyond that, it's still within the same model, right? And so that's why I've been pushing this conversation because I do think people are starting to think about it. It's just not collated in a way or coordinated in a way where people actually understood there's probably more gravitas to it than expected. It's not a marginalized discussion. It's actually something that's been thinking. And in my mind, working in consulting, you have to be the first person to at least chuck it out there, right? And then people will poke at it. People will, they'll toss it, they'll chew at it, but at least you're generating conversation that never would have happened before. And so that's sort of where I really see my role, as new as I am. And sometimes it's really good being new because you can do I don't have the history, therefore I actually can take a look at things a little bit differently. And also being neurodivergent, which is my superpower, I will always look at things differently. All right. So yeah, I would say we're at that starting point. I wouldn't say they're great examples yet.
Yeah. No, and I think that like most things, as long as it starts being brought forth into people's consciousness, right? And you're actively having discussions about it, like that hopefully like drives actual like action. At least like on my end, as a small business owner, I try to be mindful of it. And so whenever I try to identify like individuals like that who fit, not I don't say fit that description, but essentially who need that help, I try my best to either like have them on the show. Yesterday, there's a female founder that I was talking to post show, and I realized like she really needed some help on her marketing because like she was not like the agency that was working with her didn't help. So I was like, hey, like let's spend like I think I spent like an hour with her. I was like, can I just like talk through like what you're doing and give you like some guidance on this? And so I think things like that, and that's one of the nice things I really like about the medtech space is that the medtech space, for the most part, people are pretty supportive of each other. They do try and help each other the most. But I think that when instead of doing it like randomly, when we're kind of consciously like, hey, like every week, every month, I needed to be doing something, I think that's when you start seeing these things like really take flight and like better ideas actually come to fruition versus kind of like, oh yeah, like I'll get around to it when I can.
I mean, I think we all know this, like concerted efforts, coordinated efforts make bigger impact than a lot of small ones in many different directions.
Do you think, I wonder also, do you, have you seen it been done for? And if not, do you think that it would be of value or which is like, aside from VCs, like some of the larger strategics also like partnering up and doing this?
So a lot of them are already getting in the conversation at pre-seed now because they are scoping out because of how fast Femtech, once Femtech hit Series A, the acquisition path and or IPO is accelerated, right? The valley of death is really the pre-seed stage.
This is, you said for Femtech or MedTech?
For Femtech. And so when you're talking about strategics, a lot of them are already in conversation. A lot of them are starting to fund community events. A lot of them are interested in evaluating early stage because if they have the long view, they have the ability to influence how they build and also demonstrate what kind of metrics are going to be expected, right? What are the requirements? What are they looking for? Which better informs the founder of that is my goalpost, once I hit Series A plus. And these are the kind of conversations and these are the people I can talk to. And I don't have to do it on the fly. I have built this long relationship with them over time. So I've already started seeing them, especially, and not only for Femtechs, actually, a lot of it in therapeutics. So there's a couple of firms out of Texas that started doing this. I'm sure you've seen ones out of Boston. Boston historically is pretty big about this, as well as San Diego. But yeah, they're already doing it. I mean, the fact that these strategic players, a lot of PE players are now coming in at early stage says something, even though they're normally the action happens when companies are more mature, because they have better relationship control, visibility on how that market is going to act, which is better for them, right?
Got it. Got it. I wanted to go back, if you can kind of educate the audience a little bit more. Um, why is it that with Femtech, that they have such like a good, it's, at least from what you're saying, they have a good track record and pathway to acquisition or IPO the moment they hit Series A. Like, why is that?
It's what we've seen. So you've seen Honeypot. I mean, once you are a stable Series A, then your path to D and beyond in IPO. Please, this is something I've also had to put into words. Femtech has only been coined since 2016. So companies yeah. So companies like Progeny, there's a bunch of fertility and femtechs that are on the NASDAQ already, and they're doing extremely well. But it's like everybody forgot out of their minds that these existed before this term came to fruition, right? And so when you start taking data from a longer perspective, I would say a lot of new investors are like, oh, we haven't really seen a lot of conversion, or we're only starting to see exits. I'm like, no, they're actually, if you go back at least 5, 6 years, 7 years, a lot of them are actually IPO'd. There's actually quite a handful of them, and they're doing quite well. And so there's just a lot of this is the education and misconception, but also the fact that the coining of the term femtech only happened with Edaton in 2016. And it was because to bring attention to the fact that particularly in the healthcare field, right, investment for women or for cisgendered women is like less than 2%, right? And so that's
Crazy. Even though it's like 50% of the population, like it's kind of wild.
over 50% of the population. But then you take a look at who's actually controlling the dollars and what the quality of care is. So for any cisgender man, like if it means saving their prostate, ensuring quality of life, the healthcare system was already set up for them for that, if you take a look at it. For any cisgender woman, a lot of it is like, are you keeping apart? Are you dying? Like, it really is more harsh. There wasn't quality of care. And that's where there's been a huge emergence of outside of the healthcare system. You have all these consumer products and services that have gone to market because of this need. It's not because these founders dreamt it up out of nowhere. No, there was a need. And it's because the healthcare system was not built for them. I mean, if you read Invisible Women, you see all the data. The existing structures for healthcare, government, education is not built for our gender. And so, you can lament over that all you want, or you can take that as a starting point and you can start accelerating forward, because this us versus them conversation doesn't work. I'm a big fan of collaborating. If you take statistics, the most successful teams are mixed teams. Goes not only for founders, but also investors. And so that's where I'm really aiming towards this is we all need to work together because it benefits everyone, right? Women make 80% of the healthcare decisions typically in any household, which means the health of the entire household, in addition to just consumer decisions as well. So when I talk about healthcare, I adamant about consumer because it was basically the counterpart to the fact that it wasn't served in a very fragmented healthcare system that we have.
Wow, and it's wild to hear that too, because again, as you mentioned, like more than 50% of the population are women, yet like less than 2%.
A lot less. Like even what the last estimate is, like $10 billion investment in health, less than like globally, right? Less than 2% was even towards women's health. If you take a look at NIH's investment on research, less than 11% was even on women's health. And in addition to those studies, I think only 5% were data segregated. So COVID is a really good example. Like people are like, oh, these vaccines are fine. No, it impacted women differently, like delayed periods, a lot of interactions. And when you're talking about pharmacology and sort of how things go through the whole process, a lot of I would say solutions are nixed because like 34% of them didn't take into account women until the very last stage, and then They couldn't even go to market. So that just tells you the fact of there's healthcare, and then there's the system of which the data, who they gather that from, even how they assess things, just is not built to take us into account yet. We're starting. And so that's what I'm really excited about. I mean, the current election is going to be really interesting on whether or not the U.S. really does $200 million investment. But as even stating that, though, it generated the interest of general investors. So people who historically did not touch the health tech space because, let's just face it, health tech isn't really just only SaaS platforms. A lot of it is medtech, so hardware and software together, right? And so, one, I think the old systems of investment aren't really hold true because health tech has always just been very different. It's been a different animal and its evolution, lack of research, but also what's been available. The second thing is the fact that with the shifting of the market, it just means investors need to shift how they invest. And actually, if you figure it out, you're the one winning as a fund, right? Because you need to beat everybody else. You need to beat the market. Well, how do you beat the market? You can't think like everybody else. And so...
Yeah, that's exactly right. So I'm sorry, finish your thought.
No. So that's just it. It's we are definitely at a period of time where people are starting to think differently. And there's financial reasons for it. There's social reasons for it. And I think there's also, in my view, also moral responsibility around it.
No, totally. And it's funny you mentioned that because I think with a lot of people who don't know a lot about venture or even engage with VCs, think that oh, these are really innovative people. VC and venture as a whole is like everybody's kind of following each other. I mean, look at the craze around AI recently. And what I think is exciting is that there's a huge opportunity because if less than 2% investments are going into Femtech, there's all this opportunity there. Plus, now I'm thinking about it in terms of the acquisition and IPO market, there's fewer of those companies, which means that there's a higher chance that they need to meet certain milestones that are not going to be crazy because certain strategics are we don't have anything like this on our portfolio. So if somebody can just get some sort of traction and have a viable product, we'll buy the thing. And the other thing I was going to ask you about, so again, as I've had Femtech founders on the show, I've just realized wow, there's a lot of things that for quality of care you need personalization for, and it does not exist. So one of them, it's a company I need to have on the show, Cosm Medical. So they're an early stage startup. They come up with personalized pessaries. And for everybody who's listening who doesn't even know what a pessary is, these are devices that are for pelvic floor disorders. So the current state is you just get them off the shelf and a woman inserts it. The problem is everybody's body is very different. Yeah. So imagine you're getting something off the shelf for your body that's okay, and so they come up with essentially these 3D printed pessaries. What's unique though, and I kind of like this, again, the more conscious you are about it, the better that you're able to take action. So the founder is a man, right? He's an engineer, but when you go on their website, the entire management team and company right now is women, which I like seeing that, because and then even when I talked to him, he admitted, he's look, I'm a man. There's so much about this I do not know. I have to surround myself with women because that's how we're going to develop the best product for market versus 10, 15 years ago. I don't know if this would even been a consideration.
Yeah. I mean, it's really interesting, right? So the infamous story of the pink glove.
Well, I don't know that story. What's the pink glove story?
So I believe 3 or 4 European descent white men received $1 million in funding for the pink, a little pink glove that they thought that women needed when they switched out tampons and dealing with their periods. They did zero market research with the actual demographic. And so, that was a while back. So there are definitely things that we see. And when I evaluate male co-founders, it really is about their why. what does their leadership look like, and why are they doing it? A lot of them, the ones I've heard is because they saw their mother struggle, their sister struggle, their aunt struggle, right? And so there's a personal story tied to it, and they recognize that it's a human being of which there's a common experience that they want to tackle. So, no, I think that's absolutely amazing that he has, a lot of women on management. I think it's also just to say it should still be a mix. I'm a big fan of intersectional backgrounds and experiences. And so having men on the team isn't bad either. I think just we're at that point where to make something different, we have to do things differently.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And again, I think it's an exciting time because if you think about it, like how much unpersonalized care, like in terms of quality care, exists for women. There's all these opportunities to just innovate and even take like existing things that might exist for the general population for men and say like women need a specific thing for this. Like the pessary is a great example. Like when I heard about it, I asked them, I was like, there's no way that there's like not another company that's doing personalized. Sorry, my kid's in the background losing his. He heard the conversation. He's pissed too. But personalized like pessary. So like there's all these different things. If you look at the continuum of care for a woman, where do you feel like is an area where there's like a lot of opportunity for innovation? The whole thing, of course, but like, are there some certain areas? Like, let's say I give you $1 billion right now. What would Ricky think? Okay, yeah, I give you $1 billion. Okay, and it's like 3 problems. So you're gonna get a good return. Let's assume you're gonna get a good return. What are the 3 problems where you're like, okay, with $1 billion, we're gonna solve these 3 problems? What comes to mind?
Menopause and longevity as one. So the fact that women don't die at 40 or 50 when they lose their period, the fact that there is still at least 20 to 30 plus years of quality of life, and enabling that. And New York is a really good example. A lot of these women have money, like they're willing to spend on it, right? And so there is great market opportunity. I think that's why you've seen menopause being a strong conversation within those realms across the U.S., where there are big communities where, not everybody had children. Even if they did, they've gone through the life stage or they're going through this life stage, and it's very real to them, right? So that's one. Interestingly enough, I believe also perinatal care is another area. So we've gone through this influx of like fertility, right, in terms of investment. Well, these people now also have to have care, post-care. And maternity care and perinatal care anyways has always been a huge issue for underserved communities, right? So even an educated Black woman who makes over $200,000 is still at the same risk as her poor counterpart. And it's really interesting. It's because of the fact that we don't have research data, right? We don't. So again, the assumption of like one size fits all for every solution doesn't even work within women because of genetics and other aspects as well. So that would be 2. And I'm a big fan of consumer. I think.
Why is that? Why do you like consumer so much?
Because consumer, I spoke at Vive, which is a B2B healthcare conference. And I had hospitals and big corporates ask me, well, like, how can we get to know the patient more? They don't talk to us. It's like, well, because you don't know how to reach out to them and you don't know how to talk to them. In all honesty, the ones who do are consumer product goods and service. And because they have to, that's their bread and butter. So they have to understand, they have to be so obsessed to be successful. And sadly, hospitals should be this obsessed too, but they're also resource constrained. So admittedly, there's things there. But what I suggested is they should work with consumer companies where they can actually like innovate and ideate in some kind of lab on understanding the patient experience more, because there is a reason why, the honey pot was sold, right? There is a reason why there are certain consumer brands that have done extremely well. They know their demographic. Hospital systems, I think there's always this assumption, well, people will just come to us. And that's not necessarily the case, right? Like now people are finding services where they can go on the internet, like modern fertility. They weren't part of healthcare. They're acquired by Roe. Like, you're seeing all these other services being popped up to like telemedical, not associated with healthcare. Now they're starting to integrate because of insurance, but the go-to-market, the fast pace at which they can go to market faster than healthcare to deal with the solutions. I'm firm believer in innovation, and this is where they could definitely take a note. So that's why.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I think what's exciting, this is why I'm so excited to be in the space right now, is yeah, a lot more innovations happening, but something I think COVID accelerated it. But there's a lot more consumer awareness and interest in their own healthcare. I mean, if you told me 10, 15 years ago that people would be buying continuous glucose monitors on their own and paying $200 a month just because they're curious, like, I wouldn't have believed it, but here we are. And I'm one of those people. So like my hospital, my insurance company knows that I've gone in the last 2 years and gotten like a CBC and CMP, like blood analysis, right, once a year. What they don't know is that outside of that, I've paid for it myself through like consumer companies like 2 or 3 times already.
Exactly. I mean, it is really interesting, right? Like, COVID. I think the concept of the world ending and dying, it's definitely, it left its mark for better or for worse, right? There's a lot of trauma around it. I think the consciousness that also emerged from it is the health consciousness around it has definitely shifted the entire landscape. Where, people are really prioritizing, especially when there are layoffs and whatnot, like where they're actually spending their money and why. Before then, I would say we were just doing mass consumerization. A lot of it was mindless. And again, we take a look at Gen Z. They're what I call the mindful consumer, right? They're actually assessing like companies' values. They're actually looking at the ingredients labels. They're doing their due diligence a lot more than what we had available. And I'm an elder millennial, for example. And so with that shift, right, where there's money, there's power. Companies have to.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot. It makes a lot of sense, and just for the audience, because like a lot of them are unaware of this, but this is one of my favorite examples because in terms of just I think a lot, especially in our industry, because it's pretty old and traditional, and they're changing. It's like, oh, and I've heard this before from like CEOs and different, like, oh, like, does the consumer or like does the market really care about like the values of the company and everything? So I'm going to give you a great example. Obviously, it's not this because of this one thing. So we all we are all aware of NVIDIA, okay, and how like amazing they've done. So if you look in the past year, right, NVIDIA's stock has grown 153%. It's like really good, right? It's really good. Do you want to know a stock that just absolutely annihilates NVIDIA? Okay, this stock I'm about to mention went up 323% in the past year. Okay, and the main reason why is because they shifted their values, started being a little bit more inclusive, even with their branding and everything, and just changed the whole look of the company. And that's Abercrombie and Fitch. Abercrombie and Fitch grew 323% in the last, and this is a clothing company, right? So I think you're absolutely right, and I think I'm an older millennial as well. I think it kind of started with our generation, but Gen Z has really embraced this idea, and I think it's not going to go away. And so I think a lot of companies really have to start thinking about it, because at the end of the day, it's very rare, I think, for companies to have a single differentiated product where they're the only ones. There's going to be competitors, and at the end of the day, consumers don't know how to weigh product features, so they're going to decide on other things. And I think one of those things is like the company's like mission and values and everything.
Yeah. And the reviews, right? So social proof, like how does it actually work? I mean, Patagonia is a really good example. Like,
yeah, that's a great example.
Oh, it's a great example. Like there's quite a few of these brands where their longevity is there because that's how they started. And they've consistently adhered to it and demonstrated how they do it. Even REI, for example, like they invest in amazing companies. They actually invest in Femtechs, right? And so in addition to, as part of the innovation hub, in addition to their values. So, hence why for me, it's great to have the notarious oath in the VC world. But now the question is, how does that actually manifest itself practically? And there's many different avenues I think VCs can choose. But, again, it's more about being practical. For me, it's just like, if you had you and your LPs committed to like 1% of any kind of profit that came out of carry to like investing in local community infrastructure, like how many lives does that change? Like, could be roads, could be schools, could be something. Establishing a global financial literacy course, of which also there's maybe a program to shift financial metrics of which they're assessed on. Again, game changer, right? And so if not, VCs don't have to do all these things. They just have to choose the one thing that aligns with their LPs and their values, and just start. I think it's just more about, with VCs, they're run by metrics, right? So they have to meet certain aspects. That's what they're predicated on. That's why their LPs actually signed with them. So they're limited in certain ways, but I think there are ways of being creative, of which they can explore, and that's what I'm doing right now. And I think it's easier for me because I haven't been in the system. I've been a part of the ecosystem building, and I know them, and I provided deals to them, but I haven't been fully integrated into, I would say, the old guard lifestyle. So, I think it's a really exciting time. And there's at least another 6,000 VCs that will be launched in the next 2 to 3 years. So there will be more VCs on the market, which means more competition. So again, how do you innovate? How are you different? Where are you going to get your margins from? And, I would say as Gen Z, builds their wealth, and a lot of them already have a lot more wealth than most millennials, right? They're your potential LP. So I think that's one of the things where VCs are great, but there's something unsaid for like single and multifamily offices. They have a lot more flexibility. They have the same pockets, and they are very much more moved on, I would say, more angel-like mentality on the story, the values, all these other things, in addition to the metrics. But they typically are willing to take a little bit more chances in a lot of senses, from what I've seen.
Yeah, totally. And I love that that idea. I just want to go back and highlight it, what you were mentioning about taking a percentage of carry to fund some of these things. I've had different VCs on the show, and they're all struggling with the same thing, which is like getting LPs to commit money. And I think that, okay, you're doing, who's an LP? Somebody who has a lot of money, hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars. And I think that like a great differentiator, because like every VC does the same thing. It's like, here are the companies we've invested in the past, and here are the ones that are home runs, right? Give us some, your money, because we're really good at investing in. I think it would be really interesting. Carry would be one. I think it'd be really interesting if some venture fund is like going to LP and raising money and say, hey, look, like we this is the percent on our management fee. By the way, 1% of that, let's say I'm making this up. We have a 5% management fee, but 1% of that 5% we use to invest in like these kind of initiatives. At the end of the day, I think that, VCs have to start thinking about like that. And we're kind of past the days of like, hey, people are just going to throw money at us and we're going to be like set, and we just like live off of these like high management fees, and just, I think it's the game has changed, including for startups too. Like, look, we're past the ZERP era where it's like 0% interest on money, and you just get money thrown at you and be like, hey, like, cool, we can just kind of build a half-baked company and somebody's going to buy it. Like, those days are gone. Like, now I tell founders, I'm like, look, you're going to have to build like a real company that could be viable and make money on its own.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's what we were pushing in the Femtech area, because I haven't heard of anyone in the Femtech space who's been able to sell the idea and get money. That's the differentiator. I think the second thing I do want to dispel is you don't have to have hundreds of thousands of dollars to be an LP. There are VCs that are willing to take anywhere from $5,000 to $25,000. And so what I want to break the mold is, and this is part of the new era of VC, is you can be an LP. You can literally be an LP. You just got to find the right VC or family office or partners to invest, or even do crowdfunding, like equity crowdfunding. That's like as low as $150, right? And so we're in an era of democratizing actual investment. And so that's just one thing I want to throw out there, because that belief has held back a lot of underserved, under-resourced communities, because they're just like, well, we don't have hundreds of thousands, but they may have 150 to invest in a company that they truly believe in. And it really is like a grassroots. I'm a true believer in community making, just being able to overcome, because I only had an idea 2 years ago of an event in Femtech Salon. I wouldn't have gotten to where I'm at. And now, I've invested in a couple of companies, but also moving into VC if it wasn't for community. It really, truly is. That's where I feel like that's the fabric. And so I want to be able to shout out and maintain that.
I love it. Well, I'm really happy that we've gotten connected, and I'm looking forward to seeing you back here in SoCal and hopefully helping out with one of those events. But Rachael, in the meantime, where can people follow you online? Where can they go learn more? What are your handles, website, etc.?
So I would say the best one is my LinkedIn. So RACHAELKIM. That's where I actually post a lot of my thought leadership. That's how Omar came across me. I would say I am not a big social media person. So this is the introvert of the neurodivergent coming out. But LinkedIn is definitely a space where I like to collectively ask questions around this space, but also position my ideas just to test. And I'll continue to do that actually as we go into our raise, most likely next year. I'm a long-term planner. There's anything immediate. I do know there's quite a few opportunities, but interestingly enough, if people believe you and your ideas, we already have 2 people saying that they're willing to send us checks. And I haven't formalized the fund as a company yet. And so that's the power of speaking and having the idea, and encourage other people where if you have something that you truly believe in, do it. Like, just start.
It's fantastic. Well, Rachael, thank you so much for coming on the show. To our audience, be sure to look Rachael up on LinkedIn. Give her a follow. So again, it's Rachael Kim. Her tagline, you'll see, it says, investing in transformative femtech innovations to advance women's health through mindful evolution. So go give her a follow, and turn the notifications on so that when she does one of those events, you can attend it. I'm your host, Omar Khatib. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, give us a 5-star review. That's why we're the #1 show in this industry, because I constantly remind you guys to do that. And as always, we'll see you all next time. Thanks for checking out this episode. If you want to do me a big favor and join so many other people who have helped grow this podcast, take a second and look below. If you're on Apple, give us 5 stars and write a short review. If you're on Spotify, just give us 5 stars. And if you're on YouTube, hit the like button. And most importantly, if you can, subscribe. We release so many different episodes that you may miss. Be sure to subscribe and turn your notifications on. You get extra points with me if you subscribe across all 3 channels. Thank you so much. And if you felt like this episode helped you, send this to somebody who'd really enjoy and appreciate it. Share and spread the love. We'll see you all next time.